Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. I start in the name of Allah, the most merciful and the all merciful. And I hope that you are all safe and healthy, staying at home, doing your work online, and watching videos in these difficult circumstances, which I hope will end very soon, especially that the summer is heating up. And inshallah, very soon we will be able to resume our normal life and normal duties. So I've been asked by some of my friends and online followers of my websites and Facebook and Twitter pages to demonstrate for them the single monad model of the cosmos and duality of time theory. Now, for a long time I've been reluctant to do that on video because it's really extremely difficult to explain these eccentric ideas which have been developed over the last 30 years. And quite honestly, I sometimes feel that I am myself not able to really understand all the aspects of this mysterious model and can't really accept some of the conclusions that I find when I try to apply it on our everyday life. However, in recent years, more and more overwhelming evidence and rigorous proofs and exact mathematical derivations, all indicating that this is really going to be the ultimate theory of everything. Not the least because it reconciles between the two main modern theories of physics, that is general relativity and quantum mechanics. But actually, this model even removes all boundaries between physics and mathematics because not only gravity, but all the fundamental interactions can now be explained based on the new complex time geometry of the duality of time theory. And even the very dimensions of geometry are now related to the speed of light. Therefore, even pure mathematics becomes relativistic. So this model is based on the writings of the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi, a great Sufi figure of the Middle Ages, who left for us more than 300 books. Some of them are quite long as 10,000 pages. So before I leave this title page, I would like to read for you one of the quotes which I have chosen from his famous book, The Meccan Revelations, or Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, about the subject of time. So he says, the science of time is a noble science from which you know the secret of eternity. Only the elites of sages may ever come to know this secret. It is called the first age or the age of ages from which time is emerging. So perhaps those of you who are familiar with modern physics and the philosophy of science, and especially the philosophy of space-time, maybe you know that all the indications are coming to the conclusion that time must be an emergent property. So it seems like the greatest master have been knowing this all this time from more than 800 years ago. And before I leave also this title page, let me also explain to you the main idea of the duality of time theory, which is really very, very easy, at least in the beginning. So duality means that we have two levels of time. One is the outer time that we normally feel and we go through. And then at every instance of this outer time, the whole cosmos is being recreated sequentially or in a chronological order in what we call the inner level, or actually we have 6 inner levels of time. And therefore we have real time, which is the inner time, and the outer time becomes genuinely imaginary. And therefore we have now complex time, Ti plus Tr, which is hyperbolically complex. So in the end, we don't have actually like the old series space and time. We have time or complex time. So the space itself is being recreated internally. So let me start by giving you a brief outline of this presentation, which I think is going to be a little bit long because I have to do a lot of introductions to really introduce the single monad model and the duality of time theory. But the main part of this presentation will be the derivation of the principles of relativity, including special, general, and also quantum, because with this new complex time frame, the background, the space geometry becomes granular and discrete, therefore gravity itself becomes quantized. So what I will do, therefore, I will start by giving you a brief introduction about the ancient philosophical views of continuity and discreteness, and I will try to show you that whether we take the continuous view or the discrete view, we will inevitably end up with some problems and paradoxes, many unsolved problems in physics and cosmology. Therefore, here comes the importance of oneness on which the single monad is based. So from this oneness, metaphysical oneness, we will be able to extract or find how sometimes we have continuous impressions and sometimes we have discrete impressions. Therefore, these two opposite views becomes complementary. So after doing this quick introduction, I will also introduce the principles of relativity for those of you who are maybe not familiar with it, starting even from the classical mechanics and then introducing the three, but there are actually four principles of relativity. And then I will talk very briefly about some of the unsolved, and then I crossed this on because actually with this oneness or single monad model and duality of time theory, many of these problems will be simply eliminated or will be solved very easily when we take this view into account. So I will talk very briefly about some of the major unsolved problems, and then I will speak about the single monad model and duality of time theory, but I have to do that very quickly because it's really a very huge subject that contains many details that I cannot go through in this short presentation. Then I will move to the main part, which is deriving the principles of relativity, starting from the constancy and invariance of the speed of light. And I will show in this section that it's actually identical with the fractal dimension of the new complex time or time-time geometry. Then I will also derive the symmetry of physical laws between inertial frames and also between non-inertial frames, which are the second and third principle of relativity. Actually, these two principles are the principles of special relativity, and when we add to them the non-inertial frames, we will be in the general relativity. However, there is actually a fourth principle, which maybe many people, even physicists, believe that it's actually included already in the special relativity, but actually it is not. And actually here is the secret of quantization or granularity of space. We cannot actually derive this equation without taking into account the new discrete symmetry of geometry, which can be only obtained when we implement the single monad model and duality of time theory. So I will show you how can we derive this equation even from classical principles of classical mechanics and in many different ways. And actually it's now known that this equation in its simplest form and even in its modern form, which is the momentum energy relativistic equation, these equations are experimentally correct, but no exact derivation have ever been obtained for them. And even Einstein, before he dies, he acknowledged that the principles of electrodynamic and special and general relativity are not enough to derive this equation. So once we really understand how this equation can be derived, then we will realize that relativity will become quantized. And if we have time, we will speak about the first logical interpretation of the quantum behavior. Actually, there are many things to talk here. This may require a new separate presentation, but I will show you very briefly that based on this new model, we can now understand logically how the quantum systems are behaving, including, for example, the wave-particle duality and why we have uncertainty and how can we calculate this uncertainty, and also, for example, what is the exact meaning of the wave function collapse. So all this we are able now to understand it because of this complementary now continuous and discreteness. They become complementary with the new idea of oneness or the single monad model. So as you can see, maybe it's actually very advanced, and many of the concepts here are quite fundamental, and even many of them have not been discussed by any other scientist before. Therefore, before I even continue, I'll give you even more detailed outlines so that you can decide if you really want to follow this presentation or not, because maybe it's not for you, or maybe you can just finish the first part, which is mainly philosophical or conceptual, and then the second part I have divided it into two sections. One is section 1 here, and then another section. So the second section will be a little bit mathematical, but actually it's very simple. So in this first section, I will, as I said, briefly mention the history and philosophy before the single monad, the history of oneness, and even discreteness or continuity of space and matter, and therefore the role of oneness and the single monad model, and therefore the duality of time theory. All this based on the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. Therefore, I have actually to introduce this Sufi for you after I do a quick review of the various theories of substance and atomic theories of matter. So I will do that, and then I will introduce the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. Then I will mention his first principle, which is called the principle of love, as the primary principle of matter or motion. So this is the main principle behind the creation of the world and behind the motion in the world. This principle actually is even more deep and profound than the most basic principle in physics, which is known as the least action or the Lagrangian. This principle actually explains why we have least action. Therefore, this is actually a very deep principle. Then I will talk about his view of time and cosmology, starting from metaphysics to physics, and how creation began, and how time emerged, and of course also how space emerged. Now, one of the important things that el-arabi always stress is that the whole world is based on 4 principles, actually 5. 4 plus the quintessence, so we have 5. So we have, he calls them the 5 divine, the 5 divine presences, or the divine quadratic rule, in addition to the 5th essence. So we have actually 4 or 5. And from this rule, we have the 4 elements in nature, which are the known classical elements, earth, fire, water, and air. However, with a new understanding of them, which is actually very modern, because I will show you that these principles or these 4 elements are nothing but the 4 extreme states of matter, which are quantum fields. So it's actually a very modern idea, not the same view of the ancient 4 elements like normal earth or normal water. So based on these 4 or 5 principles, we will have 5 also or 4 levels of symmetry: normal, super, hyper, and ultimate, in addition to the original oneness. So you can say 4 or 5. From here, therefore, we can conclude, or we can understand the single monad model of the cosmos. I will explain this all in details, inshallah. Now, one of the main principles of the single monad model is the recreation principle. As I showed you on the first slide, the whole world is being recreated or created, you can say, in 6 inner levels of time, and then displayed on the outer level. And therefore, we don't have continuity. We have discreteness, but at some levels we have continuous space. So these 6 levels are actually the 6 days. So this is creation in 6 days or in a week, because 6 days as space, which are the same 6 directions of space, which are the 3 dimensions, and time. So for the first time in history now, you can see that the week is not conventional anymore. The week actually is the primary unit of space-time, because every point of space is being recreated at every instance of time in internal 6 movements or motions, primary steps, and then another step to show this whole 3 dimensions. So we have 7. So the week, when we understand it correctly, will be the main primary unit of space-time together, or complex time, you can better say. Therefore, here I will tell you what is exactly the duality of time postulate. Already I spoke that for you in the first slide, but I will define it very clearly when I come to this point. And then I will show the complex time frame and the two arrows of time. Now, maybe you are familiar with the arrow of time. Now we have two because of the supersymmetry. Here we have actually supersymmetrical two words, hidden and manifest, or physical and psychical, and therefore we have two arrows of time. They always combine together and break this supersymmetry, and also we have even higher symmetries. I'll maybe mention them later. Now, when we understand all this correctly, I will show you that again we will have the same classical concept of ether. However, in a new modern understanding, even better than the ancient one, and actually it will not be necessary to explain why the speed of light is constant and invariant. So actually, maybe you know that the ether have been considered invalid because the experiment of Michelson and Morley proved that there is no effect for ether drift, and therefore the speed of light is constant in all directions. However, until now there is no real proof, there is experimental proof, but I mean there is no real understanding why this speed of light is constant. Now, when we understand the real meaning of ether, we will know why the speed of light is constant and invariant in all directions, and also we will be able to solve the many problems associated with the cosmological constant, that is a constant that Einstein proposed in his general theory of relativity. So here, with this new concept of ether, we will be able to reconcile between the quantum view, the quantum field theory view, and then the general relativity view of the vacuum energy. Again, I will speak about supersymmetry and the origin of mass. Now, maybe you all know that the Higgs mechanism was necessary to explain why some particles have mass, although the Higgs mechanism does not explain why the Higgs itself have mass. Here I will show you how mass is originated or is obtained from simple points of space, even starting from classical principles. We don't need all the complicated mathematical new mathematics like set theory or other modern theories. It's actually very classical principles we are based on. Therefore, based on all this, I will conclude that geometry becomes complex and discrete or granular, and therefore from this I will show you how or why we are actually being deceived and therefore approximating automatically the space-time as continuous, and therefore we have the best theory describing it as the general relativity. So when we are applying the general relativity, we are implicitly making approximation. We are approximating the discrete symmetry into a continuous symmetry or diffeomorphism, and that's why our best explanation of space-time is now general relativity. But when you understand the complex nature of time, you will understand that there is a lower level or a deeper level which is actually discrete, some hidden discreteness or discrete symmetry, which is the basics of the new quantum relativity. Okay, so this will be our first part, and then in the second part, as I said, it will be more mathematical, but actually not very complicated mathematics. Again, as I said, it's really all based on simple classical principles. So I will be deriving the principles of special, general, and also quantum relativity, starting with the constancy and invariance of the speed of light, and I will show you that this is identical, the normalized value of the speed of light is identical with the fractional or fractal dimensions of the new complex time or time, which is the same as space-time geometry, but when we understand how it is discrete or granular. And I will also explain to you why the physics laws are symmetrical between inertial frames and also between non-inertial frames. Now, this principle of the symmetry of the physical laws is now one of the principles of the special and general relativity when we take it as inertial for special and non-inertial for general. However, there is no real understanding and actually no one even question why the laws of physics are symmetrical, are the same in all points of space. So with this new discrete symmetry, we will understand why we have such a symmetry of physical laws. But also I will do that with exact mathematical derivations of the proper time, the Lorentz factor, and also of the equivalence principle between gravitational and inertial forces or masses. Now, again, I will also show you at least 4 or 5 different methods of how to derive the famous equation of the mass energy equivalence E equal mc square in its simplest form or in its modern momentum energy relativistic relation. So I'll show you how to derive this starting from classical principles, exact derivations without any approximation or induction based on classical principles in many ways. And therefore from here we will understand the origin of supersymmetry and also the creation of mass. And then we will move to showing that with this new symmetry or discrete symmetry, the momentum becomes complex and also the energy. So far we consider in physics, we consider energy to be a scalar or just a value without direction. And that's because we have only one direction of time. Now because we have more than one direction of time, we have now vector energy or complex energy that can be multidimensional. So we can have negative, positive, and even intersecting energies. And this is really a big difference from the classical or the now modern series of physics. As I said, if we have enough time and energy left, I will inshallah talk about the first logical interpretation of quantum mechanics with many details here, but I don't know how much I can go because this is a big subject that require maybe 1 or 2 other presentations than that. So let's start with the first part,